I'd like to call the meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin. Here. Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe. Mayor Pressing.
Here. First item, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. We have October 17th and October 27th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
I'll get a second.
What? I only have two. Oh, did they do a... Oh, okay, that's why I got this extra one. All right. There are three of them on this revised agenda. October 17th, October 24th, and October 27th. So is there a motion?
There was. So moved.
Motion by Ammons, seconded by Roberts. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? I don't think there should be. This is a very long meeting. But anyway. Okay, petitions and communications. We have Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood do not wish to address the council, but they are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. Tommy Askins.
Yeah.
Hello, my name Tommy Askins. Well, I've been staying in Asking Court for 10.5 years right now, and well, we started out with a lot of good things over there, and I know some people here know that we've been doing a lot of decent things, but lately it's got to where that people who stay there, we have to sort of like watch what we do, because the people who comes over there, they just done took over the streets, took over the whole neighborhood, and you know, we can't do nothing but blame management for that, because they'll put people out, they'll evict them, they'll bomb from the place. Sorry about that. But they come right back, and those be the people who create all the problems. And management know it, I know it, everybody over there know it. So you know, we just don't feel safe, and I know a lot of people think I'll just be talking for myself, but I talk for a lot of people over there. They don't come out to say things because they think these guys gonna do them something, and they very threatening. These guys, you know, they constantly saying what they'll do to people if they, you know, we can't call the police. We can't do that, because if we do that, we ratting on them or whatever. But that's not the truth. What we trying to do over there is just keep the kids happy, try to just live. That's where we stay. And these people don't stay there, and you know, we just tired of it, and we just need, you know, some sort of security, something that where we could be able to just walk down the streets, don't have to trip over their liquor bottles, bags. You know, they do it, and it's like, hey, y'all can't tell us nothing, because this is what they do. And they don't associate with nobody. They gather up themselves. We don't know where they stay. Like I say, I've been there 10.5 years, and I don't know none of these guys. But they're there from 7 in the morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the night. And it's just a distraction. We just, it's going to be trouble. That's for sure. It's going to be trouble because every one of them, they're looking for trouble. That's why they're there. I mean, I don't think they have nowhere to go because all day they're just on the corner drinking and disrupting what we do. So, I mean, we just need something to sort of let these guys know this is where we stay, and it might not be much, but it's where we stay. So, I mean, sort of new at this, but I think I'm trying to get my point across. So I just hope we could just try to look out for. We have older people there too. We have a lady that been staying there for 34 years, but she's so afraid to say anything to anyone. I believe she talked to Mr. Roberts, but she won't talk to just anybody. But she needs. I mean, I guess we need to talk to her. I mean, the council, somebody here need to talk to her. So.
Has she talked to the police?
That's what she's afraid of. The only person I know she talked to was Mr. Roberts. And, well, I tell her all the time that she needs to talk to the police, but she won't do it. She asked me to do it. Well, almost all of them asked me to do it. And really not do it because I have a lot of kids always in my yard, and they disrupt that too. They tell me it's not your yard because management tell them it's not your yard. They'll tell me it's not your property. But I think if I'm paying the bills there, you shouldn't be able to just come there and just congregate and just do what you want in the yard I'm paying the bills for. And I don't know you, you don't know me, but you do it because you got a bunch of your guys with you. So, but I'm just glad I got a chance to tell you about this. Maybe next time I'll be able to talk a little better. I'm sort of nervous right now. But I just hope we had a couple of more guys that wanted to come in and talk, but I guess they just backed out. But we real serious about that. We need some sort of help because it's gonna be bad over there. It's gonna be. It's not the people coming who's gonna get hurt. It's these innocent children because they're coming over there. They get together and this way we gonna meet in Aspen Court. We gonna go shoot back here. We gonna fight back here. We gonna just do anything we want, and that's what's happened. So I just don't want to see nobody. I don't want to see nobody back there get hurt. I just want to see those guys. Somebody come tell them, hey, this is not where you stay. I mean, yeah.
Okay, Diane?
Thank you for coming, Tommy. I know you've done a lot of good over there, and I know there have been several shootings recently. The most recent one was right literally in front of your door. But what's been the response when you've asked for management to enforce the terms of the lease or to address some of these issues?
Well, every time I talk to Miss Beth, she would say, come on, Tommy, you know these people. I mean, I don't understand what she means. Yes, I do know, but that's not solve the problem because I know. Because what they do over there is what they do. I mean, it's not like the management don't see it, or they see it. Everybody know they see it, but we just can't get them to do nothing about it. And sooner or later, somebody gonna get seriously hurt. Most likely gonna be a bunch of kids. And I don't know who we're gonna fault from that because somebody needs to talk to management about this because they won't listen to us. I have a couple of people here right now could tell you that. So with that, I'm still a little nervous, but I'm all right with that. So I hope, yeah.
It'll be the police department. Dennis?
Yeah, Tommy, thanks for coming.
I just wanted to comment that Tommy's been an advocate for the neighborhood for a long time, but I think he found his voice pretty recently when he attended the regional national neighborhood networking conference that was held here at the, in Urbana and Champaign.
Yeah.
That visit, which was sponsored by our community development department, his fee to attend it was covered by the CD department here, and that was a turning point for Tom because he saw a lot of people from a lot of other neighborhoods and other parts of the country who knew how to speak up for themselves. And it's a long journey, so I really congratulate you. Now you did have a meeting fairly recently on a Tuesday, about a week ago, where Chief Conley and Diane Marlin and other members from CD attended and talked to you a little bit. But there's still work to do, and do you think that that meeting has led to anything different that's happening in your neighborhood? Do you want to comment on, has it changed anything at all, or do you think that the problem is going to be ahead of us still?
Well, it changed to where that it made them aware that the police presence be there, but they didn't got to where that they have sort of like lookouts. The police come, everybody, they run and hide. But when they leave, everybody come right back, and they get worse than what they was before the police came, because they don't think they're coming right back. So, and that's what be happening all the time. They everywhere, all in your backyards, on your air conditioners. It's just, I'm saying they because we don't know who they are. People just done came there and just took over. We don't know, and they look at you like, they're ready to jump on you if you say something to them. And the people over there, they don't be outside. They don't be outside because these people, they outside. So it's not a good thing. I want to let Miss Robin tell you more about it, but I know she don't stay there right now, but I do, and I just don't want to have a major problem like it's going to be, because everybody is just piling up on us now. We don't have nothing to do but try to stay in the house, try to stay away from the guys, and make sure that we just try to, live the way we can. So.
Well, thank you very much for telling us about this, and we will deal with it.
Okay.
We have a problems properties committee that will talk about it tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
So thank you very much.
Okay.
We have some questions from Eric Jacobson.
Yeah, I also want to thank you for coming. You're going, well, you're standing up and coming. I guess, will we hear, our role is just to provide resources. So my question is, maybe for both police department and community development, can we receive sometime in the fairly near future some kind of update on what you can do and what you need us to do to solve this?
Yes. Yes, we will tell you what we will do.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Robin Arbiter.
Hi, my name is Robin Arbiter. I live at 109 West Illinois. I just left the neighborhood after 15 years at Aspen Court. And I'm hoping everyone got the email that was sent based on some conversations Tommy and I had with some of our neighbors about things that would be positive things that the city could do with us, and not just the police, although we really appreciate the big step up in the police support recently, but also community development and whoever can hold perhaps the landlord, the owner, really responsible for making some changes. And I just want to go over really quickly the 4 things that we're asking for are first, understanding that there's a sale pending, and we don't want to make a huge, we don't want to do anything that would jeopardize the sale. Let's say that. At the same time, we don't want to let the current owner just sort of allow things to go as they are, because it's intolerable. And people are about to, hit winter and be indoors a lot anyway. But now our goal is really to have the situation be normalized so that people can sit out at whatever time they want to and feel safe in their front yards. We feel like that's not too much to ask. And especially because this is a neighborhood, despite the attrition that is taking place there, of mainly children, people, under 13, and seniors, people with disabilities. So it's not like they're the most mobile group of people that have other places to go. This is where they are. The 4 things we're asking help with are, first, that the Urbana Police Department seek with Aspen Court's current owner, Green Street Realty and Chris Saunders, an immediate multi-pronged safety plan, which of course would mean activating the nuisance property mechanisms. Regardless of whether that is reached in the next 6 to 8 weeks, whether part of that or separate from that, we'd like the Urbana Police Department to seek with Chris Saunders of Green Street Realty an immediate plan for improved security that which would allow a focus on providing recording cameras or eyes on the streets there during the hours when there is a staff person there, but also, and particularly when the office isn't staffed, so late afternoons, evenings, overnights, and weekends, because it gets, the only thing missing that makes it different from the Wild West is the tumbleweeds. I mean, Tommy's not lying when he talks about his situation where people are up all night, but not everybody. Not everyone is able to enjoy the up all night experience. And then the third thing is that this had been raised by previous developers with their plans, and I think the police had been part of that discussion, and we were sort of, as neighbors, a little iffy on it, but I think some of us have come to believe that blocking off Ivanhoe entrance into the complex would be useful for preventing cars from simply flying through the complex, and there'd be one entrance basically in and one out, one to Hunter, the cul-de-sac, one to Learman, but you couldn't go from Learman to Ivanhoe and then out back into the neighborhood. If you went in Learman, you'd have to come back out Learman, and that would allow whatever resources were available to be focused on that intersection of Learman and Hunter. And then, so we really would like a security kind of plan in addition to a overall safety plan. And then finally, I think the big thing is just that we're at that point where we have a new, perhaps rehab developer coming in, and the residents need to have opportunities to hear about the incoming management's practices and policies, and have some of the experiences that they've been having for the last 20 years on the property be part of the wisdom that goes into planning, because our property has been in decay for 20 years. The property is not our property, but the place we live has been in decay, and many of us have survived 8 to 10 different managers of increasingly problematic sort of styles and policies. And so the other thing I want to say, because I can kind of hear some of my friends saying, when we talk about some of these things, well, maybe you're talking about, the broken windows policing. And I just want to say that this is really different than that, because we're on a property that's actually just decayed. It's decaying. I mean, there are people who had tarps on there's one person who had a tarp on his roof so long because it was, the fix would come later when the season was better. That tarp rotted on the roof, and he was moved from his unit before the fix happened. So in other words, the fix didn't really happen for him. But he was there for the 6 years until the tarp rotted. You know, you drive on the property, it's clear the owner's putting no more money into it. Well, there are reasons for that, but again, decent tenants who pay whose rent is paid and who are paying their rent are paying the price for all of this. So this isn't really a broken windows thing. We're asking community development. We're asking our friends on the council, some of whom are some of the best volunteers in the neighborhood, and we're asking residents to step up and be involved in problem solving and in making the neighborhood something that sends a message that people will respond to. Because right now people are responding. I mean, the part of why people feel comfortable coming out there isn't just the history of what the place is, but it's the reality of how it looks. It invites bad behavior. It appears to be at 60% occupancy. You know, half the places are boarded up or shuttered. Things are disrepaired. I mean, really, you just are sort of hearing the Western music in the back of your mind. So that's no good. Anyway, I also wanted, I was asked to please give thanks to some people, and I'm going to do that. We wanted to thank Chief Connolly, Lieutenant Sanders, the officers who spent increased amounts of time not just patrolling and giving us extra patrols, but supporting community efforts. Chief Connolly and Lieutenant Sanders attended a recent neighborhood safety meeting that Tommy called, and Sergeant Hewitt was a reassuring presence at last Sunday afternoon's Halloween party for the kids, also that Mr. Tommy organized. Our thanks to them, and also to Dennis, Diane, and Bill Brown of the City Council, Kelly and Matt of Urbana Community Development, Alex Batista, the Human Relations Officer who came out to the safety meeting, and Shirley Brown, one of our residents who supported the safety meeting, and also to Dick Ziegler, who's here from the Urbana Neighborhood Action Committee, and to residents and friends. There were 6 people here this evening from the neighborhood. I don't know if others are in line to speak, but we're not asking you to fix things for us. We're asking you to fix things with us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. I appreciate all you've done for that neighborhood. And I think it will be changing, but we got to deal with the emergency situation right now as well. So thank you very much. Anybody have questions for Robin? Eric.
Do you think people are squatting in the vacant units?
No, I think they're squatting in the occupied units.
Okay.
I mean, look, that's maybe a pejorative way of putting it, but it is not entirely. I mean, it's one thing when people stay at your place because they've got nowhere else to be in terms of like a roof over their head. But it's another when people come to your house because your house is party central, and you're going to pass out, and they're going to be there for another 10 hours. And we see a lot of that where the actual person in charge of the apartment isn't necessarily conscious, and that person's company is, you know, there kind of doing whatever. And it could be anything from, you know, rolling dice in somebody else's front yard to just being kind of, you know, really loud and raucous, which is one thing at 4 in the afternoon, and it's another at 4 in the morning. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
I have a question.
Dennis.
Robin, we've had our hopes raise and fall concerning a redevelopment of the property. We're still hoping for something to occur. One of the questions that comes up, and you actually mentioned it a little bit, is I guess I'll call it perimeter security. And so you're talking about bollards or some impediment for through traffic onto Ivanhoe through the apartment complex. One of the things that we observed at the Halloween party that happened right in front of us was people coming from the neighboring street through their backyard into the complex with huge, gigantic trash bags to throw into the dumpster of Aspen Court. And Tommy explained that this is a very common occurrence because the people who live on the neighboring properties do not want to pay for trash collection. Therefore, they use the trash dumpsters of the court. And one of the ways that they access that is through gaps in the gates and fences which are on the perimeter. At the same time, the Aspen Court residents have advocated for a connectivity path to Philo. So those are two different needs of the community, but they do address the concern about a perimeter fence. And I wondered if you felt that you supported the idea of a perimeter fence because you don't necessarily want it to become a gated community, or do you? What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not, I mean, especially because I moved off, I'm
Yeah,
not
you're-
going to stay whether
Okay.
it should be a gated community or not. I'm usually not in favor of that. I guess the main thing I think is, well, let me just say, you have to ask, has putting up a gate, does that keep people safer? I mean, what does that really do? Because 1507 or 1505, whichever it is, on Washington, put up a 7-foot fence. Are people, has crime really changed on that property, or has some kind of crime changed? I mean, I don't know, and that's something to look at. But as far as that fencing thing goes, the thing I've always advocated for is that we understand that when you put a fence up to keep people out, you are effectively mostly keeping people in, especially when they're relying on foot and bike to get places. That fence or whatever you put needs to be permeable to people pushing strollers, going around by non-vehicular traffic. And so I still would advocate for connectivity, but I think there's a way to combine that with design that encourages or discourages certain kinds of behavior, activity, or sense of self in space. And I think there's ways to design around that. And the other thing I was going to say is that whole dumping thing, which has been brought to LNAC's attention time and time again. Disclaimer, I'm not representing the group. But that whole issue of people dumping, there is a way to address that because it's usually coming from renters, and the landlords are responsible for making sure that garbage is collected. So if a landlord's tenant isn't taking care of that, then I feel like it should be brought to the landlord, and the landlord needs to work that out with the tenant, and that has to not continue to be, the problem of the complex. Personally, it becomes an inconvenience when. So let me just say that at Aspen Court, I feel we've had not enough dumpsters for the people who live there, which is why that problem is exacerbating for the tenants. Because on Friday, when management goes home and the dumpsters are empty, and Friday 0.5, after the manager leaves, the dumpster's full, and you as a tenant can't put anything onto it, that's an issue, and it is exacerbated by people coming in from the neighborhood, but it's also exacerbated by somebody moving out, because there isn't necessarily like an adequate amount of dumpster space all the time for people who are there. So I think all these issues are some of those are those have to do with management issues, I think.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carletta Donaldson, did you want to say something for the City Council?
Thank you.
First, just a brief moment of silence, and thanks to our veterans who may be in the room and who are watching for what you've done as Veterans Day approaches on this Friday. First, I'd like to thank the council for the time and attention given on serving this great community that we live in. Then there are always concerns, sometimes seen as complaints, from residents that should be considered, even if they don't email, or as we've heard already a few times tonight, attend the designated meeting times. What happens after the elections are done? Why not go to and reach out to residents you've reached out to while campaigning for the very seat most residents have elected you to serve and make conditions better in the city that they live in, some by choice, some necessity. What has happened in the last 50 years? Let me just pause to take a break and the advice of Dr. Chandra Gill, the CEO of Black Academically Speaking, the first city, yes, it's Urbana, in the state of Illinois, to desegregate the public schools which gave a basis what I believe was to come. Project 500 at the U of I, and the desegregation of the Champaign City schools. Those responsible for organizing and working with the late Urbana school members, who then and now, with the most precious asset in our community in their hands, our youth, and are never monetarily paid, but should be, made it possible to integrate the schools, which for some now who made it possible believe that it looks like it may not have been the best thing to do, though at that time they believe it was. And what they did, they were involved in the community, in the schools, in the churches, helping families, helping people to make Urbana better. Oh, and before I forget, all 6 of the main players, and I choose to call them the Dr. Ellis Drive subdivision, or Ellis Drive 6, involved in the desegregation of the Urbana schools, are still either living in the Urbana or the Savoy area. Though some have some health challenges, they still get around and are involved in supporting this great community. And 3 of the main 6 organizers of the desegregation of the Urbana schools are here tonight: my parents, Carlos and Willetta Donaldson, and of course the Reverend Dr. Evelyn Burnett Underwood, who later became the first Black on the Urbana School Board. The other 3, Paul Hersey, Shirley Hersey, and Joanne Jackson. And of course the entire Ellis Drive subdivision neighborhood was involved as well. We owe them so much, so with it now 50 years later, we should be doing the same thing. Now, earlier tonight, I found out, I missed one of the meetings online. I've been out of town, but I understand that the council increased their salaries. We've been here before, and it's amazing at the meeting I did see, and again, I said I missed one meeting, and it appears that Aldermen Madigan and Marlin and the areas they represent, which I am part of one, had chosen to say no to the raises for the council, and I believe initially. Now, contrary to what some believe, and I am not advocating for or against a raise for either the mayor, city clerk, township, none of those voting yes are in the main areas, as we see it, least able to afford the increase. And I know that it's already happened, but it's just something to consider. But it does come from the taxpayers, whom the mayor has over and over reminded us about the impact that Carl has had on the community. Now, I remember at one of the last discussions I participated in on this topic, there was an alderperson who stated that this was a small price that you were being paid for the work that you do, and that's why we can't get anyone to run for either council or mayor. Me personally, I've lived in Urbana most of my life. I grew up in Urbana, and once I started voting, I may have missed 2 because I did not live in the area. But I haven't seen a problem with candidates running in my time in this city as a voter. So I paraphrase that to say, at least for the next discussion on salaries, and I'm hoping, or stipends, whatever we want to call it, that in the spring, and I guess one question I should ask is, can the increase be reversed with the new council? Because as I look at the council today, I guarantee you it won't look like this in the spring. Someone's going to be missing, there's going to be changes, so I do know that for a fact. And one thing that I can say about the other Mike Madigan, you did at least have one more person on the vote with you, and I appreciate the 2 that voted not to increase the salaries, because that makes a difference. And if we look at what Carl is doing, and not the entire hospital, but they're leaving the area, enough to affect our revenue in this city, going to Champaign, along with Health Alliance and possibly others, do we realize what that would do to the businesses that we have in Urbana, not just the ones in downtown and Lincoln Square? The most affected are those downtown in walking distance and in Lincoln Square. There's not much to come to Urbana, for if you don't work here, the business and the revenue is certainly going to be missed. Ask a business owner in the downtown area, and then I have to go back to the issue of Champaign. We seem to be so selective when we want to compare or not compare Urbana to Champaign. Do we really see what's happening in Champaign economically? We have lost most employers where families could work, live here in Urbana, raise and support their families, and it's getting, well, we all know something must be done. Jobs, where are the businesses who are hiring full-time with insurance in Urbana? We certainly have to create jobs by bringing in businesses and not discouraging them when they inquire or decide to build here. So I'm hoping that when the next council takes seats, since this is already passed, that we decide on this increase to maybe put it somewhere, volunteer on the volunteer boards and commissions for members who do take the time to volunteer to assist in city business. Why not donate some to the school board, since we seem to collaborate regularly with them, and they're doing a major justice for the city in dealing with our youth and making plans to make the city better through our youth. And now I just say this was not the time. With what has already been said before, the state and the state of Illinois, the state of our economy in this city. Again, I do appreciate the other Mike Madigan for not wanting to raise. Every time you turn around, we're raising taxes. So I do appreciate that when I do hear that. But we have to see growth, especially, and I'll just name a few things, Windsor Road being opened, and the major, and I say topping of the major arteries of the city, Lincoln Avenue, Bradley, Vine, Florida, although Race does look good. It took a while, but it does look good, and probably a few other streets. It doesn't take much time, and it's obvious if we're making increases to stipends, we do have the money. And lastly, just a simple question to make sure that I'm understanding, where is the study that a bike path is needed at such a time as this on the western, I believe it's stated there, western Urbana side of Bradley, from I believe Lincoln to Romine, but namely Goodwin to Romine? That seems to be a concern. I and others, of course, who could not be here tonight, just say not now. Again, thank you, and thanks to the council for the time and attention given on this serving this great community that we live in. To the listeners and those here in the audience, remember to vote tomorrow. And if I could just also thank the News Gazette for their area history detailing the desegregation of the Urbana schools throughout this year in the newspaper. Thanks again, and thanks to our veterans who served.
Thank you. Eldris Melinda Carr does not wish to speak, but she is also concerned about the Ellis subdivision sewer. Okay, we have a presentation on the health insurance. Todd Rent.
Good evening. I will try to make this as brief as possible. In your council packets, I believe there should have been a memo that detailed the health insurance selection process for this year. So I'm going to allow that memo to kind of stand, and I just want to try and supplement it with a few of the slides that we have for today. I know that it's getting late, and I don't want to prolong the meeting any longer than is necessary to answer any questions that you may have about the process itself. First of all, I'd like to say that, as I tried to explain in the memo, currently the city has a joint labor management benefit committee that came about as a result of the latest contract negotiations that we had with our three unions, with the Fraternal Order of Police, the International Association of Firefighters, and AFSCME. I won't even try to go through all of those in the title. And as a result of those meetings, as a result of working with the mayor, basically what we've done is we've taken a look over the last couple of years at the healthcare market and used that committee as a process to try and evaluate how to make the health plan the most valuable for our employees while staying within the budgetary constraints that are laid out by the City Council. And so what you see, the information that you see in front of you, is really the result of that. So last year, in a sense, I say we got a pass because we received a 0% increase for our renewal rate. I think the initial rate was 3%. It was lowered to 0 with no changes to our current benefit plan. So even though we started meeting last year, really many of the meetings that we had went towards basically informing ourselves about this very complicated and volatile market that we have in terms of healthcare. So we looked at the national healthcare scene, we looked at the regional healthcare scene and the local healthcare scene, and tried to, in a sense, educate ourselves as best as we could, and bringing in some individuals to help with that process on exactly what the healthcare market looked like. And so even at the end of last year, when we received the 0%, we realized that based upon the volatility of the market and based upon some of the unique market conditions of Champaign-Urbana, we knew that we needed to prepare in a sense for what was coming down the road in terms of some of the changes in terms of premium rates and benefit changes. And so at that time, we actually set forth basically two priorities. The first priority was to have an assessment, a complete assessment of the employee needs in terms of their priorities and their preferences with plans, so that if we had to cut or if we had to increase premium rates, we knew exactly what was most valuable to the majority of the plan holders. And then secondly, there was a commitment to do everything that we could to get as many competitive offers as we could. And so as a result of that, and again, I'm going very quickly through this, the takeaway from the surveys, we held them in April and May, the takeaway was that 77.5% of the people really wanted to see an expansion of the tiers that we currently have. So right now we have a single plan and a family plan. So if you're in the single plan, you obviously, that means you get one person on that plan, and for the family plan, you could have one spouse on there with you, that's the family, or you could have one spouse and 10 children, that's also the family plan. As you can imagine, those different configurations could cost a very different amount to the plan over a particular plan year. And so one of the things that the respondents told us is that they really wanted to see more plan options. And then the other thing is they wanted to see lower premiums, better coverage for diagnostic tests, and lower out-of-pocket cost. So what that did is it guided our selection process as we were looking at the competitive quotes. And to really make this very brief, we solicited everyone. We went to our brokers, the Barham Group, and told them we wanted to get quotes from as many different viable competitors as we could. Cigna and Aetna declined to quote. We received a double-digit quote from United Healthcare. I believe that was 21.9%. And then we also looked at another group that is not exactly a health insurance carrier, and I went to the trouble of explaining how they're structured in the memo, the Intergovernmental Personnel Benefit IPBC cooperative. And it's a cooperative of several governments in Illinois, and what they basically try to do is they try to use their pooling to reduce rates for all of the member groups. And I went into much more detail in the actual memo. I won't go into that now. Basically, their quote came out to about 9.2%. And so we were left with the two competitive bids that we had were a 4% from Health Alliance, which would have renewed our current plan, or a reduction of 11.5% from our current rates from Blue Cross Blue Shield. In terms of the plan design, based upon the survey results, we wanted to keep our current standard and premier rates. So our premier, basically, we call it the 100% plan, and the standard plan we call an 80-20 plan, and that's just based upon the coinsurance that you would typically pay. We wanted to keep that, but based upon the survey results, we also decided to expand the tiers. And when we expanded the tiers, what ended up happening is the group that had been grouped into the family plan, they actually grouped out and became more reflective of their actual costs to the group. So if you're an employee plus spouse, that is going to be much less expensive than an employee plus spouse and 5 kids. And so what ends up happening is the employee plus spouse and employee plus children come out of that group and they have a much lower price. However, that drives the price of the family up. And so when we broke it out in 4 tiers, we requested quotes that would include those 4-tier rates. And so when we compared the 2 lowest rates that we received, which were Health Alliance and Blue Cross Blue Shield, you can see here, based upon the numbers, there was a significant difference in the final total premium rates annually for each of those. So if you look at the far left, where it says annual premium totals, you'll see the $3,054,972. That's what we're currently paying, or at least that was the estimate of what we're currently paying. One of the things to understand about all of these numbers, they vary with enrollment. It's very hard to pin down exact figures, particularly on an annual basis. So it's even hard to budget for in that sense. But what we're dealing with are basically estimates, and we're trying to use the same baseline numbers to talk about all of them here. So this is our estimate. You'll see the Health Alliance plan basically increases that cost by about $120,000 or so. And then you see a significant decrease with the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So this, obviously, you see quite a difference in actual cost, the total cost of the plan there. And here we can show sort of what our rate history has generally been over the past 15 years or so. In terms of what employees pay, the way that we actually do this is, the formula is kind of interesting. What we do is we take the standard plan for an individual, and the city pays for that. So if I'm on the standard plan as an individual, the 80/20 plan, I would not pay anything per month. If I'm on the Premier plan, I pay about $33 a month. We take that amount of the standard individual plan, and we put that towards everyone's plan. And so everyone gets that. If you have dependent coverage, then there's an additional average of 37.5% that we pay into that for you. And so these rates reflect the current rates that individuals pay, and they're slightly different based upon what employee group that you're a part of, because basically it's bargaining, it's collective bargaining. There are some people who bargain different deals based upon their union and their union membership, and you can see the different group rates there. So what we've done in this year's, what the committee did in looking at this year's rates, is we used the savings, some of the savings that resulted from the reduction on 11.5% to basically equalize everyone's payments going forward, and equalize everyone's contributions and the payments going forward. And what you see here is you can see the current rate for Health Alliance for the various tiers. Now, obviously, the employee plus spouse, employee plus partner, and the current rates, we don't have that, so that's a NA. But you see what they would have been, or what they are currently under the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. And basically what we've done is we've taken all three of the different rates that you would have paid, we averaged them, and showed an average savings per employee for going down or using the Blue Cross Blue Shield or selecting Blue Cross Blue Shield. This is the standard plan, and here are the average savings for the Premier plan for our individuals under the plan. At this point, are there any questions about the actual cost of the plan and the evaluation of cost of the plan?
Eric?
Yeah, I'm sure the numbers are what they are. I'm surprised at how much of an increment there is for children. I didn't think children were that expensive.
You know, I think the people in the committee were surprised too. But if you, well, I just think that, yeah, these were the rates that the actuaries quoted us. So what I want to do very quickly is move on then to the actual plans. And really, you're talking about the difference between, oh, I'm sorry, were there any other questions about cost?
Mike?
So you showed a chart, you showed there we go. Premium rate increases. How does that compare to the national average?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the sources that you look at. Right now, the national average for this year, I think, is somewhere between 6% and 8%, depending on how large of an employer you work for. Employers our size, probably a little bit more, because it's more difficult to get more competitive rates for us.
I was just curious about the comparison over the last 15 years, as is shown here on the graph. That'd be an interesting number to look at.
Right. You know, I will tell you that there's been quite a bit of rate volatility in the last 5 years. So where you see us sort of precipitously declining, I would imagine most other places you're going to see either holding steady or some type of gradual increase at the minimum. There are some, obviously, all of us have heard the horror stories of double-digit raises in terms of, or double-digit increases in terms of premiums. We have been very fortunate based upon our experience, based upon sort of good financial leadership, not to experience those at this point.
Diane.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, just so I understand, I read through all the materials. If you're looking at the last 4 years, just to make sure I'm getting this right, there was a 0% increase in 2014, a minus 3% in decrease, basically, in rates in 2015, 0% in 2016, and 4% proposed for 2017. So if you average that over 4 years, it was a net rate increase of 1%.
Sure.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And the other thing that stood out to me was the assumption that the committee worked under, that any premium increases would be borne solely by city employees.
Well, that was based
decision
upon.
was,
I'm sorry.
Who made that? I mean, where's that coming from?
Basically, that was based upon the actual budgetary allocation that was made by the mayor and the council here. So if I'm understanding correctly, the budget basically held the line in terms of increases for premium spending, and so that was the assumption that we worked under.
I think we budgeted more than was actually spent, and that's where this $2 million in savings is being derived from. Is that right?
I'll defer to the finance director.
So in this budget, in the FY17 budget, it was actually based on employee elections, so what plan they enrolled in and what the city's share was. So it wasn't exactly the same dollar amount as last year because some employees would have changed their enrollment options, but it was essentially the same.
As last year?
Yes.
Okay. Has that always been the policy, that any rate increases would be all on the employees and not shared?
Well, I can speak for the time that I've been here in terms of in the human resources position, and I believe that since the time I've been here in the last 2 years, that has generally been our approach, yes, to do
For 2
everything
years.
that we could to forestall any type of rate increases.
Okay, thank you.
To answer your question, this is a budgeting thing, and we didn't know what we're facing financially, so this was a very conservative estimate that we can't afford to pay more than we are now, but it is also a very good way to start bargaining, because I don't think you want to automatically put increases in and then go to insurance companies. So it's worked out very well. So we didn't know how it was going to turn out, but that was a basic way of starting. And then when we got the savings, we shared the savings with the employees.
So when this contract's negotiated, what's the starting date? Is it January?
Yes, it's
January
the calendar year, so it's January 1 to December 31st.
Okay, thanks.
Is it a one-year contract?
Yes. They are always 1 year with health insurance. Every now and then we're able to get a 2-year contract or a price lock for dental, but with health insurance, 1 year.
Mike?
So is there a change in the providers for city employees?
Yes, in fact, are there any more questions in regards to cost? Because then I
Okay,
can
so
go
you've
into
got
the
more.
second-
All right,
Yes.
very good.
All right, so basically Health Alliance is an HMO. Blue Cross Blue Shield is a PPO. What Blue Cross Blue Shield basically did in making their proposal is they tailored their existing PPOs to mimic or to be as close as possible in terms of plan coverage, plan and benefit levels as our current HMO. However, there are two notable exceptions. Number one, is it's been pointed out, provider access. Number two, out-of-pocket maximums. So I want to talk about those. So basically, the way it works at this point is that under the existing Health Alliance plan, our employees have access for primary care to Carl and Christy. They can go to either one at their discretion. However, anything outside of the contractual provider care that's provided by Health Alliance is subject to pre-authorization, and it's completely up to the discretion of Health Alliance whether or not to grant. And so that is very typical of an HMO. That's my understanding of the way that this HMO is run. For a Blue Cross Blue Shield, because it's a PPO, you have in-network care and out-of-network care. In terms of their in-network care, there are, I believe that there is an exclusion, or I know, there is an exclusion of Carl primary care. So that's adult med, family practice, internal medicine, and pediatrics. And that's specifically for the Champaign-Urbana area and the Mahomet area. So for instance, if you're trying to receive Carl primary care, for instance, in maybe Rantoul or Danville, oftentimes those primary care physicians will be available to you at Carl. However, if you're trying to receive primary care in Champaign-Urbana or Mahomet, those primary care physicians will not be available to you in network for Blue Cross Blue Shield. Specialist, yes. So if you currently have a cardiologist or you have a neurologist, you still have access to your specialty care through Carl, however, not the primary care. And so what will happen if you want to go to, if you want to continue to go to Carl under this plan, that would constitute out-of-network care. And that's subject to much higher rates because obviously they want to keep people in their contracted network. And so if, let's just say that you're an employee and you have a Carl physician that's a Carl primary care physician and you would like to remain with that physician. My understanding of the way that they do reimbursement is that, let's just say that that cost is $300 for that session or for that appointment. What Blue Cross Blue Shield will do is they will pay, depending on whether or not you're on the high plan or the low plan. If you're on the high plan, it's 80%. If you're on the lower plan, it's 60%. They will pay 80% or 60% of the usual and customary fees that they have on their fee schedule that they would typically pay for that service. So let's just say that for that $300 visit, that the charge is $300, their usual and customary would be about $100 that they would charge. So they're going to pay 80% of that $100. They're going to pay $80 towards that, but then you are going to have to pay the remaining $220 that's associated with that charge. Does that make sense for everyone? And so there's a significant increase in the amount of expense if you go to an out-of-network provider, which makes sense because they have the contracts with their in-network providers, and that's where they're getting their discounts, that's where they're getting their pricing. One of the other things I'll point out is...
Jacobson has
oh, I'm sorry.
Question.
So there's no question of, for example, going out of town to, let's say, a very good cancer center, for example, in New York, if you wanted to do that?
Well, no, if you wanted to do that under the current plan, that would be completely up to the discretion of Health Alliance. If you want it, okay. If you want to do it under Blue Cross Blue Shield, what you would do is check to see if that provider is in network. And I will tell you, as I mentioned in the memo, you know, the 5 top hospitals that I looked at all had facilities and physicians that were available in network through Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you're talking Mayo, you're talking Johns Hopkins, Massachusetts General, UCLA. They all have physicians that are in network for Blue Cross Blue Shield.
I'll just tell you from my personal experience, that is a very big deal when you need it. I went to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, and my life is so much better than if I hadn't been able to do that.
So that's one of the major differences. So in-network, out-of-network, that is a major difference. So what we're telling employees is basically you have a couple of options. You can obviously stay with your Carl primary care physician. That will cost you much more out of pocket, and what you'll see here once we get to the out-of-pocket rates, it'll cost you more out of pocket. However, there's somewhat of a reminder that in terms of your premiums, you're going to be saving anywhere from $1,500 to near $3,000 in premiums this year if you are under the family plan or under employee plus spouse or employee plus children. So there's going to be a significant savings that you're going to realize in premium rates that is set savings for this year. So you know that you're going to save that much. The question is whether or not you're going to have an incident that is going to take you over that amount in terms of for your primary care. And again, you were talking primary care, so you're not talking about the more expensive specialty care. So the committee weighed all of these factors very, very carefully. I mean, you can imagine that a committee that's made up of, and I described this, it's made up of members from the union, 3 members from each union, made up of employees, management, and HR. We took all of those issues very, very seriously and looked at them very soberly. And this is the decision that was ultimately made. In terms of out-of-pocket maximums, the thing to notice here is currently under the Health Alliance plan, the out-of-pocket maximum for single is $2,000 for one plan year and $4,000 for family. For in-network medical care, it is the same for Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's single coverage for our single $2,000, family for $4,000. However, if you choose to go out of network, those out of network expenses have a much higher out-of-pocket maximum, and it's double. It's $4,000 for single and $8,000 for family. Again, they are specifically trying to target people and get them to get in-network care. Also, there is a separate track for pharmacy, which makes a big deal if you are, and there are a couple of ways in which this can make a difference. If you're a high-end medical user and a high-end pharmacy user, then what will happen is you can get to your $2,000 out-of-pocket maximum and still get to your $1,000 out-of-pocket maximum for the pharmacy, and you would be paying $3,000, which is $1,000 more than you would pay as an individual or under single for your current Health Alliance plan. And the same is true for the family. However, the reverse is true also. If you are let's just say that you have a chronic medical condition that costs a lot of, your pharmaceuticals are very high. But it's a chronic medical condition, so you're not being tested for it, you're not receiving a lot of medical treatment for it. It tends to be very stable. What could happen is you could reach that $1,000 limit for your pharmaceutical out-of-pocket max and then not have to pay any more. So on the flip side, you could save approximately $1,000 as an individual. So it just really depends on what the mix is of the care that you need. But those are the two major differences. There are other differences, and one of the things that you can see here is that basically, again, they did their best to mimic the plan. So when you're looking at in-network physician visits, they're both $25 copays. Specialty visits, $50 copays. In terms of out-of-network physician office visits, we talked about this. For Health Alliance, basically it's allowed only with up to their discretion. With Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have out-of-network coverage, and so that would be 20% or 40% co-insurance for usual and customary fees. Wellness visits, $0 for both. Urgent care, there is a difference. For Health Alliance, it's $50. For Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's $25. Inpatient hospital services, it depends on the tier with Health Alliance. Top tier is $50. Bottom tier, it's $20 or 20% co-insurance. With Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's all $50. It's $50 regardless. For outpatient services, outpatient hospital services, Health Alliance, $100 copay for the top tier and 20% coinsurance for the bottom. For Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's $0 copay for outpatient surgical services or outpatient hospital services, and then a 20% coinsurance. For ambulance transportation, again, Health Alliance, it's 100% or $100 copay. For ambulance transportation for Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's a $0 copay or 20% on the lower tier. And then emergency room services are $200 for either. So there are some differences. And there are some differences when it comes to pharmaceuticals. And so right now, one of the major differences there is that under Health Alliance, you have the R Extra program, which basically gives you very, very low prices, like $4 on certain generic pharmaceuticals through their R Extra program. There is nothing comparable under Blue Cross Blue Shield. However, Human Resources staff have put together a resource guide for people specifically in regards to these particular types of medicines, basically showing that you can get very similar rates just through the programs that are offered through Walmart, Walgreens, and Meijer here locally. And basically they have similar programs that are not even, they don't even go through your insurance. You just go straight in and you can get these prescriptions on those programs. And then you can see there are some other differences with the pharmacy benefits, not significant. And so before I wrap up, I just wanted to reiterate, I wanted to thank the mayor for her leadership in this area, and I also wanted to acknowledge the committee. These are people who have worked, generally we meet every other Thursday. For the last couple of months, we've met every Thursday for at least an hour to an hour and a half, basically trying to hammer these things out, trying to make really difficult decisions about people, their choices and employee value, and really they just worked very, very hard. And I'd like to say, I have here sitting with me from IAFF, the International Association of Firefighters, Steve Doggett, who really, he was a member of the committee, and he really just had a very strong voice in the committee. I also have Deputy Chief Sylvia Morgan, who was a non-bargaining unit member of the committee. We also had earlier, although he had to leave, Sergeant Adam Chacon, who was representing the FOP. And so, you know, one of the things that I wanted to really bring out today is that this was an effort by everyone. And it's not, these are not easy decisions, and no one took them lightly. And even with the reduction of 11.5%, everyone is very sober about the impact that this could have on our employees. So we're doing everything that we can to get them the information that they need in order to really maximize the value of the plan for them and to make sure they're making the best choices for their families.
Okay, Diane and then Bill.
Just curious, how many people or families will be now required to get a new primary care physician?
When we looked at the census, I believe that the number of families, I think I actually, yeah, I think it may be in the memo. I can tell you, well, I can tell you for certain, the ones who on the actual survey that we did basically said that they really, their strong preference was Carl, and they would not accept others
That
for
was
an option.
41, but I didn't.
Yes,
there's
yeah.
no number on how many actually have to make a change.
Yes, and one of the things to realize, well, I can look that up and I'll get that to you, because I know I have it, I just didn't include it in the memo.
Well, and the reason I'm asking is, last year I'm in Health Alliance, and I had to find a new primary care physician within, you know, the Carl network due to the fact that my physician retired, and it was difficult because most of the physicians were not accepting new patients. And I think back to when I was, when my kids were young, the most important doctor in our house was our pediatrician. And I see that this also is going to require people to find new pediatricians, and it's very disruptive. So my question is, for the employees, how easy is it going to be for them to get a new primary care physician and a pediatrician within the Christie network? Because that's a lot of people shifting over. Now, it'll free up some doctors at Carl, which is good news for those of us who stay at Carl. But when you go, if you have 100 people looking for pediatricians and primary care physicians over at Christie, how is that going to work?
Well, one of the first things we did when we were considering the proposal from Blue Cross Blue Shield was actually contact our brokers and have them contact the administration over at Christie to make sure that they had the capacity to absorb our group. And the answer was a resounding yes.
Well, of course administration is going to say that.
However, in addition to that, one of the things that
ground.
we've done is we've asked them, and they have agreed to open up their panels for City of Urbana employees. And what that means is, over the 30-day open enrollment and period that we have, if you have a City of Urbana employee that calls over to a physician practice that is currently closed, they will open up those practices to accommodate City of Urbana employees.
That's guaranteed.
That's my understanding, yes.
I truly hope that's true. Yes, that's a good thing. Because otherwise, it can take a long time.
Are there any other questions?
Bill?
Yeah, a couple. First, since you mentioned open enrollment, there's some information things coming up on open enrollment. I assume it's okay for council members to go and check those out, too.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes, please.
And there's going to be one at the Civic Center. Can you mention the date and time?
I'm sorry? The Civic Center?
Yeah.
Yes, it should be at the, let's see, the very back of this handout. Yes. I can't exactly read it from here. Oh,
Okay.
there it is. So the
November
Employee Health
21st,
and
okay.
Benefits Fair will be Monday, November 21st from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. at the Urbana Civic Center.
Okay. And then the Benefits Committee, I know was, from my understanding, came about as a result of some of our negotiation agreements 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. In those agreements, was there a charge or requirement for the committee to, was there any kind of charge besides to sit with management and negotiate for the insurance and the best available insurance and come to some agreement, or was there a more stringent requirement that we not go above 0% or something like that?
No, it just said that the negotiation or the selection had to occur within the budgetary constraints of the city.
Okay.
At least that's my recollection of the language.
Okay, thanks. And then just one other is, at the U of I, we all pay a little bit of our insurance, and it's basically on a sliding scale. There's 2 or 3 at least groups of employees, depending on how much you make, how much you pay for your insurance. Was that considered by the benefit committee, and did they discuss that? And
Absolutely. And I will tell you, we spent quite a bit of time on it. The conclusion at the end of the day is that we were already implementing so many changes to the plan itself and how we did the plan, the contribution rates, that we wanted to save that one until later. We wanted to get everything stabilized under our plan for this year and then take another crack at it next year. But that was something that was explicitly discussed on several occasions in the committee.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys did a great job.
Mayor,
Charlie?
as they're leaving, I'll just comment that I was in the same position as Diane several years ago and took advantage of the situation, and my primary care is at Christie, and I had no trouble finding a doctor, and I'm quite happy. So,
It's also worth pointing out that this is Carl's decision that they don't want to offer their physicians to other plans. And so they could change it if they wanted to. Okay, next we have unfinished business, which we're certainly not going to get to tonight. Reports of standing committees. Who is the last?
I think that was me.
Okay, Aaron Emmons, okay.
So, for the committee of the whole, I move ordinance number 2016-10-097, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for FY 2016-2017 staffing adjustment. It's been moved in second.
Okay, Charlie seconded. Okay, motion by Ammons, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
yes.
Mayor Pressing?
Yes, that motion carries.
Ordinance number 2016-10-100, an ordinance amending Schedule H of Section 23-93 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code requiring stop signs at a certain intersection, Orchard Street at California Avenue.
Second.
Did you want to make the motion?
Yes, I move on behalf of the committee. I so move.
Okay, motion by Ammon, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Madigan.
Yes.
Ms. Marlin.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Smythe.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Ordinance number 2016-10-102, an ordinance amending Schedule J of Section 23-183 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking at all times on certain streets, Bradley Avenue between Lincoln Avenue and western city limits of Urbana. I will motion that, but I do have some questions.
And I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Ammon, seconded by Roberts.
Yep.
What are your questions?
So, there was a question I posed as it relates to parking in front of Mount Olive Church, on what that is the north side of Bradley Avenue. I thought in our discussions there was some agreement that on church days or funerals or something like that, that there would be an understanding that cars would still be able to park there, and the bikers would have to adjust to that.
And that is correct. That is correct. What I have here on the screen, the Mount Olive Church is to the north here. The green area would be what we would call a shared bike parking lane. Basically what it is it's a parking area that can be used unrestricted. If it's not used, then the bicyclist can use that area. So basically that's what that is.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion by, we have more questions. Sorry about that. Mr. Matt,
So I remember when this was before Traffic Commission, I guess that wasn't terribly clear to me. So does that mean on any given day of the week, if one car is in that bike lane, that it's no longer a bike lane? Or is this
Right,
just
that
for
would be
Sundays
correct.
and?
No, you're correct. It would be basically a car could park there at any time, and the bicyclist would have to go around the car and go into the vehicle lane. There will be signs that will be placed that say basically bicyclists may use full lane. One of the reasons that we took this approach was the Bicycle Master Plan actually talked about dedicated bike lanes. If we did dedicated bike lanes, we would have no parking on this street in front of the church. We felt that this was a compromise, that the church itself, Sundays is a heavy use, Wednesday nights is a heavy use, at least one or two nights a month, and talking with the pastor there is a heavy use. At other times during the day, there's really, very minimal use. So it's kind of a compromise to not restrict parking there, but allow that space to be used by the church and then also by the bicyclist.
So now I'm confused.
Okay, Eric
That-
Jacobson?
That answered my question. I was going to ask whether most of the time that lane is free of parked cars, and you're saying yes, that is the case.
That is the case. Now, some of the parking restrictions, just to be clear here, I have some hatched areas, and I'll zoom in. They are what we call triangles, sight triangles at the intersections. Basically what they are is a dedicated space at the intersection itself where we need to be able to have visibility when a car exits a side street and enters into Bradley Avenue. That's where the restrictions would exist. At the other areas, though, the parking could exist within this green spaces here, except for obviously in front of, like, say, the new Leak and Sons entrance and the entrances to the church themselves.
Okay, we have a motion by Ammon, seconded by Roberts. Any other discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr.
Yes.
Ammons. Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Madigan.
Yes.
Ms. Marlin.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Smythe.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Ordinance number 2016-10-101, an ordinance amending Schedule K of Section 23-184 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking during certain hours on certain streets, Michigan Avenue. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Ammon, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr.
Yes.
Ammons. Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson. Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Ordinance number 2016-10-104, semicolon. I'm sorry. That's a colon or a semicolon?
That's a colon.
My fault, yeah. Ordinance number 2016-10-104, an ordinance amending section 23-192 of chapter 23 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code, parking permits. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Motion by Ammons, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr.
Yes.
Ammons? Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Ordinance number 2016-10-103, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 20, Section 20-615, advertising on or in a sidewalk cafe. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Ammons, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries.
Ordinance number 2016-10-105, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class R2 and G1 liquor licenses for Bangkok Thai, 1104 North Cunningham Avenue, Urbana, Illinois. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Motion by Ammons, seconded by
Roberts.
Roberts. And Mr. Madigan.
Madam Mayor, on advice of counsel and compliance with state law, I shall recuse myself, and good night.
Okay, thank you. All right, any comments on this ordinance? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes, and this is one time that a G1 license is actually going to work as a G1 license.
Mr.
Actually,
Smythe?
they all do now.
Well, they all do now,
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Yes.
Mr. Smythe? Okay.
Okay, so we finished the roll call. That motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Ammons. Reports of special committees. We don't have any. Reports of officers, the IDOT Task Force report. We have
You thought you were done.
people who have been very patiently waiting here.
Actually,
Melissa
as
Haynes.
Melissa sets up with the, you want to switch seats, or how do you want to do that? And that might be easier. As Melissa sets up the PowerPoint, Eric, I wanted to mention very briefly that I will echo the mayor's response that the city is working diligently on Aspen Court. That I'd be remiss not to mention the fact that we've had 98 shootings since this morning in our community since January 1st, 22 of them in Urbana. On the 29th of October, an individual was shot in Aspen Court, a lady driving down the street in a car, her car was shot up. On the 23rd of October in Aspen Court, we recovered 79 shell casings from a ridiculous number of rounds that were fired in that area. Since that time, we have had a heavy police presence. In fact, the Champaign Police, the U of I Police, the Champaign County Sheriff's Office, each contributed officers so that we had literally 24 hours a day, around-the-clock police presence there. And I'm glad to report that at least for the last 8 days, we haven't had a shooting. So the answer is yes, there's a lot more to do, but it's got to be done through problem properties and through the entire city and with the effort of everybody and not just the police. Because we, as we found 1,000 times, we can't arrest our way out of this.
Right.
Okay. With that, I will transition. Everybody met Melissa a few weeks ago. She is going to provide you with an overview of the information concerning the IDOT traffic study.
Yes, I apologize in advance if I yawn. This is a bit past my bedtime. So the information that I'm presenting here is all included in the report. It's presented graphically instead of in tables. The report will be available tomorrow for download on the same website that you get the City Council packets. So this presentation and then the report that you've already received covers almost 13 years worth of traffic stop data that's been reported to IDOT, almost 47,000 traffic stops. A traffic stop is defined as when an officer stops a motor vehicle for a violation of the Illinois Vehicle Code or for a local traffic violation. So those are the traffic stops that we are specifically looking at here. So by year, Urbana Police Department has made between 2,900 and 4,300 traffic stops. The standard deviation is about 500, so a range of about 1,000. You can see that it drops pretty significantly in 2010, 2011, and then it has increased a couple of years since then. I've talked to some of the folks that were on the past traffic task force, and that correlated pretty well with staffing. I did not run that for the most recent years, but if that's an interest, I can certainly do that. And then we collect race on all of the drivers that we stop, and you can see the breakdown of race in the graph there. So my recommendation for tracking for just the numbers is to just continue to compile the numbers of traffic stop and races of drivers by year. It's reported yearly to IDOT. It's helpful to see it year by year, side by side. This is all in pages 7 to 10 of the report. And the benchmarks. This has been significant discussion, as you all are aware. How do you measure the driving population? How do you know who's driving on Urbana city streets? Because we know who we're stopping, but we don't know the population of who's driving in Urbana. Using just the traffic stops alone, we're looking at, about half of the people that we stop live in Urbana. The IDOT study uses the census, an adjusted census population. So they look at people that are reported to the census that live in Urbana that are age 14 and up. When we look at step traffic stops, which are targeted patrol, that number looks a little bit different. And then probably the best thing to use is drivers involved in traffic accidents. That removes all discretion from whether somebody's stopped or not stopped or ticketed or not ticketed, and that probably gives the best picture of who's driving in Urbana. Now, that's not a perfect measurement. There are some roads that are more prone to traffic accidents than others, and some people may frequent those roads, so they may be more likely to get into a traffic accident, but I think that that's probably the most acceptable benchmark that we can use. So I've just got the yearly disparity ratio here on the right, and you can see how that kind of changes over time. And we see the biggest change here in African Americans. They are the, by far the highest disparity ratio. That peaks here in 2010, and then it's continued to drop since then. This yellow line represents a disparity ratio of 1. That would indicate that if somebody has a disparity ratio of 1, then we are stopping that race as to be expected based on the benchmark that we're using, which is drivers involved in traffic accidents. So you can see that Hispanic and Asian starts out below, goes above, Caucasian consistently stays below. I will caution you on the Hispanic and the Asian drivers, those are a pretty low number of traffic stops, so a small fluctuation can have a big impact on the ratio. I think that Hispanic drivers account for about 5%.
So can I ask you a quick question, please?
Absolutely.
And this is helping me understand, the census data says that there's a certain number of African Americans who live in Champaign-Urbana. And that gives you it would give you a benchmark of, is that the 14.83 or something like that, right?
Where are we at? Okay, African Americans, and then this is that specifically live in Urbana, not Champaign-Urbana, but just within Urbana city limits.
Okay. So when we say that we're stopping people, only half of the people who we stop live in Urbana, what the argument is then that the benchmark that's being set by the census doesn't match because half of the people getting stopped don't actually live where the census was determined.
Well, they live within usually a local area, but it's not, people drive to Urbana, they drive through Urbana. We've got the university here, we've got Carl, we've got, different employers. So people that are driving in Urbana are not necessarily the people that live in Urbana. I live in Decatur, but I drive in Urbana every day. So I'm not captured by that census number, and neither are almost half of the people that we're stopping.
So how does that affect I just want clarity. That's a benchmark. It's been a sticky point, so I was hoping that you would offer clarity on that particular point before we move forward.
So my suggestion is that we use the drivers involved in traffic accidents as the benchmark. We will continue to report the traffic stop data to IDOT. IDOT will continue to give us a benchmark based on the census numbers. That's useful for comparison across the state, so we can see kind of how we're doing using the census. But when we're looking at our individual numbers, we know that half the people that are stopped here don't live here, so we know we should probably use a different measurement, and that measurement would be drivers that are in accidents. That's a better indicator of who's driving on Urbana city streets than just the people that live here.
So maybe if I ask you this question, you'll tease out more
Yeah.
succinctly what I'm trying to get at. The numbers say that African Americans are stopped at whatever rate more than anybody else. What difference does it make where they're from if they're still stopped in the city of Urbana? Because that's what's being addressed, and that disparity still exists, whether they live in Decatur, Kankakee, or Tolono. They're getting stopped in Urbana, and African Americans are stopped more. So what does, yeah.
So what the census is measuring is giving us a baseline. So we know who we're stopping. We know the proportion of people that we're pulling over. What we don't know is the baseline. So the people that we're pulling over, are they representative of the drivers? What the census is giving us is it's telling us, are the people that we're pulling over representative of the people that live here? And that's not what we want to know. We want to know is, are the people that we're pulling over representative of the people that are driving on Urbana city streets?
Well, see, I guess what I'm getting at is if we're dealing with a disparity of how African American drivers are treated or stopped by the Urbana Police Department, it doesn't make a difference where they're from, where the person is from. If they're black and they stopped in Urbana, then the Urbana Police Department stopped them.
Yeah, and
Right.
we're not arguing on that issue. We're saying here that we know that we've stopped about 30% of the drivers that we're stopping are African Americans. About 55% are Caucasians as of year-to-date 2016. So that's not something that we have a disagreement on. We know who we're stopping. The question is, what are we comparing this to? So it's not necessarily the people that live here, because the people that live here may not be driving here. The people that live somewhere else may be driving here. What we want to know is there disparity in the numbers of drivers that are pulled over compared to the number of drivers that are driving on the street?
No.
I'm sorry.
Eric?
I understand that this is a different.
No.
Well,
No, I think the thing that here, let me try to say it in a slightly different way and make sure I understand it. I think that the issue here is that the benchmark that's being used is the accident. So there's an assumption that African Americans and Caucasians are approximately equally safe drivers.
Mhm.
So that they're neither one is more like, and that is, I happen to look at the statistics for fatal accidents nationwide, and that seems to be a good assumption that actually, although those statistics also suggest that Asians are much safer drivers than either, but that does seem to me, the accidents does seem to me to be a good benchmark in terms of figuring out the racial, at least between African Americans and Caucasians, the racial composition of the people who are driving on the streets as opposed to the people who actually live in Urbana.
I guess I just simply want to know what does census have to do with the driving? It just simply sets.
It's what IDOT decided to use. So that's what comes out in their yearly report every year. The disparity ratio that they give to all of the agencies, all of the police agencies across the U.S. comes from, or all of the police agencies across Illinois comes from the census. So that's the number, and that's the disparity ratio that's assigned to us. And we're saying maybe that's not the best one to use in our situation.
Aaron, I have mentioned before that U.S. Department of Justice has said that social scientists no longer would trust using the census estimates for who is driving. And it gets to be more problematic when you have a small city, and especially problematic in Urbana because so much of our population is U of I students, and they tend to drive less, and they tend to be less African American, unfortunately. But when you look at the people who are in accidents, that corrects for the population problems that we have for, you know, it's really measuring who's driving on the streets and then who's getting stopped, we already know, but we were trying to measure who's getting stopped with who's driving. And who's driving can't be really well measured by the population estimate from the census. The census doesn't really know who's driving. They just say by a certain age, and they're assuming that they're driving. But U of I students aren't driving the way they used to like 10 years ago. They just don't bring the cars to campus that they used to. So that's why we're trying to get a better baseline.
The question?
Diane.
Just to put some numbers on this, how many accidents are there on a yearly basis? I didn't.
That would be. So this is the accident data from 2013 to 2015. We changed how we started tracking it in 2013.
What page?
And this is on page 13, and it looks to be just about 3,000 traffic accidents.
Where are you seeing that?
The top of page 13, the total number of drivers. Table 5.
It's just sort of different.
Oh, here. Okay. Sorry, I missed that. Thank
That's
you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. And to put this in a bit of context, I was able to run the disparity ratios using the census data for Urbana police-citizen contacts. So we have contact with a large number of people on any given day, and these are all categorized and captured in the data system. So I'm able to pull it out and do a little looking. And so this is the universe of all police interactions with citizens. So this includes the traffic stop stuff. This is everything together. And an arrestee is someone who's not just been arrested, but also has been issued a notice to appear or a traffic citation or has been custodially arrested. And we can see that even with arrestees, offenders, victims, witnesses, reporting persons, and field interviewees, African Americans have a higher disparity ratio than any other racial group. So that's something to do some further digging on and to determine, what's going on there. So my recommendation for tracking for this is to just continue to track the traffic to stop disparity using the accident benchmark rather than the census benchmark. We will still continue to receive the census benchmark from IDOT, but I think that the best one for Urbana to use is going to be the accidents. I would love to analyze all of this spatially. I would like to be able to map all of this and see, where are the serious crimes occurring, where are the calls for service occurring, and does that overlay with some of the traffic stops, fatal accidents or personal injury accidents as well. I'd also like to further look into disparity on all police contexts. I'd like to rerun this table, removing the traffic stops from the analysis, and then do some additional analysis on the field interviews, pedestrians, the IDOT pedestrian stops, which I think is going to probably be next. Okay, now we move on to the motivation for traffic stops. In the report, this is page 19. They started tracking the motivation for traffic stops in 2015 as a result of the recommendations from the IDOT task force. There were two different periods. There was kind of a pilot period, and there were some inconsistencies that were identified, and officers were retrained. So this graph up here just shows from after the retraining, January 1st through September 30th, which is when I cut off the data. The introductory period data is included on page 19. So you can see that about 72%.
Could you say what the retraining was?
Well, what we found was the officer, when they were making the decision, because it was subjective, did they stop the vehicle strictly because it was speeding, or did they stop the vehicle because they saw that there was a muffler dragging, and there were inconsistencies in how we defined whether it was a community caretaking role, purely a traffic enforcement, for instance, down at Aspen Court the last 7 days was all targeted patrol, 100% because of the shootings down there. We weren't categorizing it strictly that way. They were on the cards, so...
So you're talking about how to report it properly?
That's correct.
Okay.
How to document it properly, so Sergeant Charles actually retrained the entire police department. Sergeant Charles was our representative on the task force. So he then modified that. We talked together as a leadership team, and we were able to refocus on how we were going to define those 3 categories.
Thank you.
And so the definitions are included in the report, but I'll read them here. Traffic issues are about 72%. That's with the motivation of reducing the number and severity of motor vehicle crashes. An officer conducts a patrol in an area with a disproportionate number of crashes. Targeted patrol is with the motivation of investigating a specific incident. An officer conducts a targeted stop. And then community caretaking is with the motivation of educating a driver. An officer stops a vehicle. And so we've got about 24% community caretaking, 4% targeted patrol year to date. And then I've broken it down by race here. You can see the traffic issue is by far the highest. We do see some variation in community caretaking across races. And then targeted patrol is a pretty small number, so I'll advise you to use caution in interpreting this, but in all of them, across all races, it's still a pretty low occurrence. And then we can look at the reason for stop. So the motivation for stop is something that we track internally. The reason for stop goes to IDOT. So we've got moving violations, equipment violations, license and registration violations, and commercial violations. Most of the stops are for moving violations. We've got a handful for license and registration, commercial violations, and then about 20% for equipment violations. We've broken this down by race as well, and African Americans and Hispanics are more likely to be stopped for an equipment violation. And I did break it down by the year of the vehicle in the report as well. And that pretty correlates more with the year of the vehicle than it does with the race of the driver. For the reason for stop by race and year, I've reported the percentages down here. This is also in the report. I know it's probably kind of hard to read on here. This is page 22 to 24. And then I've broken it down by the motivation and the reason for stop. So if someone is stopped for a traffic issue, it's most likely to be a moving violation. Targeted patrol is also more likely to be a moving violation, and then community caretaking is a lower percentage. For an equipment violation, we're looking at mostly community caretaking, followed by targeted patrol and traffic issue, and then license and registration is mostly community caretaking as well. So there have been some suggestions about how to track this moving forward on the motivation for stop. I would encourage us to maintain at least the traffic issue and community caretaking. These are distinct categories. We see it in the reasons for stops. We see it, traffic problems are mostly moving violations, while community caretaking is mostly equipment violations. In a couple of slides, you'll see it in the outcomes where the community caretaking is more likely to result in a warning, where traffic issues are more likely to result in a citation. I think that those things should stay separately. It seems that the concern is with the pretextual stop, and most of that is captured by targeted patrol, but there are some gray areas where it's fuzzy. So if I were making a suggestion on how to really capture whether someone is stopped under the pretense of further investigation, stopped for a valid reason, but the officer wants to make a further investigation into something, a checkbox would probably be the best way to do it. So you're capturing your motivation. Is it traffic? Is it targeted patrol? Is it community caretaking? And then, was this a pretextual stop? Thank you. Okay, so we've talked about the motivation behind the stop, which is why the officer is initiating the stop, the legal reasons for the stop, which is the moving violation, equipment violation. So now we're going to move on to the outcomes, which is what happens after the stop is initiated. So this is post-stop decision making, not the decision to stop, but after the stop has already been made. So if you're pulled over for a traffic stop, one of three things is going to happen. You're going to get a warning ticket, you're going to get a traffic citation, or it's going to elevate beyond a simple traffic violation, so it's going to be more serious than that. So for the last 12 and a half years, about half of all traffic stops have resulted in a traffic citation. About 40% of drivers have received warning tickets, and then in 8% of the cases, it's something more serious than a traffic violation. I've broken that down by race over here. You can see that for the more serious than the traffic violation, we're looking African American and Hispanics are the two largest proportions. And then with Asian drivers, you're more likely to see a traffic citation. So with the disparity ratio, we have the benchmark for this. We know who we're pulling over. So there's no discussion as to, who's driving, who's not driving. This is what we're looking at. We know who we're pulling over. We know the outcomes of the stop. So this is a perfect measurement of the disparity ratios. So we can see across years. The report goes back to 2002, but for space here, I've gone back to 2008. This is on pages 27 through 40. You can see that for the citation, especially in the last couple of years, it's all pretty close to 1. There are some drivers that are more likely than others to receive, or some driving racial groups that are more likely than others to receive a traffic citation, but for the most part, it hovers pretty close to 1. Traffic warning is about the same, although Hispanic drivers are slightly less likely to receive a traffic warning, and Asian drivers are slightly more likely to receive a traffic warning. And then for more serious than traffic violations, African Americans have a much higher disparity ratio. 87%, 99% more likely to receive or to have that traffic stop elevate into something more serious than that. And all of the outcomes for that are listed in the table.
Bill Brown has a question
Just
here.
while we're on that table, so the more serious than traffic stop disparity among African Americans, would it help to have that by motivation as well? I'm curious whether that higher disparity would be the same whether it's a traffic enforcement or whether it's a targeted patrol. I guess part of the question is, on the targeted patrols, do the officers look at plates for a registration sticker and stop people if their registration sticker is expired? Is that more likely on a targeted patrol?
Or that would also fall into the category of equipment violations if your license plate is expired or
okay.
The license plate light isn't visible by up to 50 feet.
And is that one of the more serious than traffic violation charges? Expired tags?
We'd have to go back to the
okay.
last page.
Yep.
No,
this is the arrested ones. I don't have the outcomes on there.
Oh.
In the issue of brevity.
And then, kind of similar to that, if an officer runs plates and finds the owner of the vehicle is on parole, does that increase their likelihood of them being stopped for something if they're on parole?
I guess it would have to be case specific. Currently, for instance, the Fresh Start Initiative, if a member is identified on the Fresh Start Initiative and they are on parole, there's a higher probability if we're dealing with a targeted patrol effort that they would be stopped as a result of patrol, but it would have to be on a case-by-case basis. On page 32, if you look at the more serious offenses, it's not on the PowerPoint slide here, but 30.64% are for suspended or revoked driver's licenses, 20% for driving under the influence. So the answer is, to your question specifically about license plates or stickers, the answer is no.
Okay. a revoked driver's license would be. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I guess I'd like to talk maybe individually with you a little bit more about maybe during a outcomes by motivation table.
Sure.
Dennis?
And so Bill's question makes me ask one, too. Is running license plates of cars either a standard practice to troll to find out if there are people who are considered to be, who have a larger record of traffic instances, or well, I guess I'm wondering, like, what kind of, how often do officers, is it a procedure to run license plate numbers on cars that you are observing just driving in a certain neighborhood?
Is it procedure? No, but I mean, every night I hope that our officers are running hotel parking lots to check for stolen vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
When you run a license plate, you're not going to be able to get a criminal history, a past history of a person. You are checking for wanted, for suspended or revoked. So you are checking with the license, driver's license that is attached to that, or if there are outstanding warrants, you would be able to check, but you wouldn't be able to determine whether or not, just by running a license plate, that they have been issued 4 tickets in the past, as an example.
I asked that because of a personal experience where I was driving on the expressway and was pulled over, and it turned out that the reason why I was pulled over was that I was from out of state, and they were just checking to see if my car was a stolen vehicle.
Sure.
And I thought, well, I mean, I hadn't done anything. I'm just driving through as a regular person on the highway.
Right.
Why would a cop
Well,
be
for that
running
very
this kind of
reason, to see if your car is stolen, to see if that car is connected. It happened not less than a month ago, and as a result, there was a murder suspect from Colorado that was arrested in Danville. I mean, the reason the license plate is affixed to the vehicle is so that you can identify that vehicle.
Correct, right. Well, it seems like a rather flimsy reason to stop a motorist when you don't have an answer yet.
Right. You couldn't stop him if the vehicle wasn't stolen. If you ran a license plate and it came back Dennis Roberts, that would not be probable cause to stop the vehicle.
Okay.
Running the vehicle through the computer, the in-car computer, is a totally appropriate practice. But to stop it without probable cause would be totally inappropriate. You would have to have a reason to stop it.
So license plates give a lot of information to the police as they're going through an area.
Absolutely.
So would it have been possible that Dennis was stopped because his make and model of car was one that had been reported stolen?
It's hard to. I don't know any of the details, so it would even be hard to speculate. I just couldn't say.
Nor do I.
Did you get a ticket? Aaron?
So, Melissa,
Yes.
correct? So, tonight you just giving us this. Is there going to be more detailed breakdown of this, the disparities themselves, or something later, or is this the crux of what you're going to present tonight? Is this?
So what I'm presenting tonight is what's included in the report. If further analysis is warranted, I'm happy to.
Yeah, we were planning on having this be the introduction and then having another discussion at a committee. That was the plan, because this is an awful lot of material, so we don't expect the council to get all their questions answered just this one time. Oh, Diane.
Well, the thing that caught my eye in the report was actually in your chart here in the upper left, the dramatic reduction in the number of arrests from traffic stops between 2004 and now.
Mm-hmm.
And the report said that the police leadership team decided to change arrest policies. So I'm curious what led to that change in policy, and what other policies could be changed looking forward, going forward.
the what other policies can we change looking forward, I'll hold for a moment. But with respect to the policies regarding the decision to not make custodial arrests were a number of factors. The jail came to us and said our jail is overcrowded. We have to start to prioritize which people will be taken into custody. So in the past, we would take people to jail for driving while their license is suspended. And we made a decision, not only the city of Urbana, but collectively the law enforcement communities in this Champaign-Urbana area, working with the sheriff's office, we identified certain crimes that were going to reduce jail overcrowding by way of issuing tickets in lieu of that. So that was the process that we worked through. Certainly laws changing as well. So with certain laws being reduced from felonies to misdemeanors, those kinds of things over the years, we've made the decision to adjust our custodial arrest strategies.
Okay, Eric has a question.
This is a little bit of a complicated question, but do you feel that reducing the custodial arrests associated with traffic stops has had any adverse effect on public safety?
I don't, anecdotally, I can say, I can't say one way or the other, because on some of those occasions, for instance, not having fingerprints available because you wouldn't be able to book them, or not having a photograph available for a person responsible for a series of crimes, because we didn't have that information available to us, could that have hindered us? Certainly it could have. I can't say statistically that that has been the case, so.
I mean, there's no increase in crime rate that corresponds to that, as statistically.
I don't know. I didn't study it well enough to be able to answer that.
Okay. Maybe that's actually an interesting
It is.
question, if it's possible to get at it. Yeah.
Analyze that, will you?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so looking at the arrests from traffic stops, as Diane mentioned, you can see a pretty big decrease once the policy changed late in 2013, and now we're 2014, 2015, and 2016. It's a pretty sharp decline. And then looking at the arrests from traffic stop by race, this is for all the 12 years, 57% African American. It's a pretty big chunk compared to the number of African Americans that we're pulling over. But this is, representative of about 3,500 individuals. And then the arrested drivers' charges is presented here since the policy change has been implemented, so from 2014 to 2016. So you can see the disparity in some of the cases. So for the top two, 124. So we're shifting here from looking at stops and individuals to looking at charges. So somebody could be arrested on 5 charges. So all of the charges are counting here. I can't separate it out very easily. So this is one person could be in 4 categories. So this is a slightly different analysis than the previous ones. But so for warrants, African American is at 72%. Driving under revoked, African Americans is at 66% of the 57. So that's some of this, but you get into driving under the influence of alcohol, and Caucasians is at 51%. So this goes kind of down the line, and then the number of charges is over here, so you can get a better picture. And then this goes back to an earlier question, the motivation for stop by outcome. So if you're stopping somebody for community caretaking, you're more likely to get 80% of the time you're getting a warning ticket if you're stopped under a community caretaking motivation. For a traffic issue, about 70% of the time if you're stopped for a traffic issue, you're getting a ticket. And then targeted patrol, which is a smaller number, so about 309 traffic stops here compared to a much higher number over here, but you're more likely to get a traffic citation. But we also see an increase here in this resulting in something that's more serious than a traffic violation. So if we add together the traffic stops and the community caretaking with the raw numbers, the success rate, I'm there's something that's going to turn into something that's more serious. So you're taking somebody that's got a warrant or that's got a weapon, or it's something more serious than just a simple, here's a traffic citation or a traffic warning ticket. It's 3.6% for community caretaking and traffic issue combined, compared to 9% for a targeted patrol. So it's almost twice as high. But targeted patrol is a much smaller number of traffic stops than community caretaking or traffic issues. So that's something to consider. So for tracking, I'd like to look a little bit more into the racial disparity for arrests.
Dennis has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would have back up just ever so small a piece here to page 38. There's
Okay.
the graph, table 20, it's not a graph, it's a table 26. This is one that's the demographics of arrested drivers charged with various offenses between 2014 and 16. And we have some cases where we have very high African-American arrests and 0 Caucasian arrests in the field of obstructing justice, but then especially weapons offense. So we've experienced the fact that no Caucasian driver, whoever was stopped in this period, had an unregistered weapon in their car. Is that correct?
So this is of 12 traffic stops that we're looking at for the weapons, and of 13 traffic stops that we're looking at
So
for.
it's very small.
It's really small. So to.
But they're all small, except for the first.
Except for the first couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess we don't have enough data to really understand this. We don't have a real average yet. It just seems unbelievable that it would be such a high disparity. Okay.
If you go back one to table 25, that's all of it. So that's from 2004 to 2016, and these are arrested drivers, not just the more serious ones. Obstructing justice, here we see we've got Caucasians at 18.24%. And weapons offenses did not meet the criteria. It was into,
It's not on the chart.
yeah. There's a lot of different charges, and so there was a cutoff at some point.
Okay. It just caught my eye.
Yeah. Okay, and then multiple stops by drivers. So there was some interest expressed in looking at individuals that had been stopped more than one time. So I did some analysis on this, looking at a 3-year time frame. So from January 1st, 2013 to December 31st, 2015. Of the 12,174 stops, 75% of drivers were stopped one time in 3 years. 15% of the stops were individuals that were stopped 2 times in 3 years. And then 8% of the stops, or about 300 individuals, were stopped 3 times in the 3-year period. Looking at the race of the driver, this is the majority is African American. And then on page 42, I break out the reason and the motivation for stop, but most of them are for traffic issues and most of them are for moving violations. The motivations pretty much line up with where the rest of the stops are, but there's a larger portion of equipment violations and license and registration violations than when we're looking at all of them. So if somebody's stopped more than once, it's more than likely to be an equipment violation than a traffic issue. So my recommendation for tracking on this is to, track it quarterly and then distribute a report to command staff so that they can, keep track of drivers that are perhaps habitually breaking traffic laws, or, if I can identify if someone's being unfairly targeted.
And we certainly want to, I would like to see, for instance, if we have the ability to write a note in a computer and we issue a warning. Everything is done in writing. So we issue a written warning for a taillight that's out. You've given anybody an opportunity to get the taillight repaired. 2 weeks later, you see that the taillight is still not repaired. You see on the computer that they were given a warning on this date. They will be stopped again that 2-week period later as a result of the fact that that problem hasn't been addressed.
Aaron?
So I'm going to set an appointment so that I can come and sit down with you and talk a little bit further, but I just wanted to get just one question clarified. For what reason were you focusing on accidents alone versus, because the rest of the report seems to be using the census data to come up with all of your conclusions? I'm just confused. Are you using the census data to draw the rest of your conclusions?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so what are you using? Are you still using traffic accidents to?
So in the places where I've reported disparity ratios, I think I may have missed it, but any place that I've reported a disparity ratio, I should be clear on to what the disparity ratio, what the denominator is, and in anything that I'm doing a disparity ratio for pre-stop decision making, or for the decision to make the stop, is using the accident data. For post-stop decision making, I'm using the universe of people that have been stopped by the police. So the disparity ratio that's looking at whether somebody's received a citation or a warning ticket or something that's more serious than a traffic violation, what we're using that to compare to is the people that are stopped. So it's not the census, it's not the accident data, it's who's being stopped and then what happens once they're stopped.
So the disparities that you see now are, this benchmark conversation is out the window. We're just
For
dealing with.
post-stop decision making, the benchmark is who's being stopped. We have that information, it's not a discussion. For the pre-stop step, the decision to make the stop, that's where it's a little fuzzy. And where I'm suggesting and where other scholars have suggested that the best thing to do for a proxy measurement of who's driving on the streets is who's involved in accidents on the streets.
So the percentages of the disparity or the range of the disparity that you're seeing in the post, how close is that to what you saw in the census data?
It's not, we can't do a comparison with that. So we're not looking at who lives here, we're looking at who's been stopped, and we know who's been stopped.
Right.
Is that
so?
the
My
question?
question is, if the census data findings or statistical analysis said that African Americans were stopped at twice their rate of the driving population, and then the accident analysis based the information still turned out to be the same. That's my question. How closely related are those from, or can you even pull that out?
Page 14, table 8, gives you the disparity stops using the different benchmarks. So the disparity using the census driving population, which is what the census comes up with, what the drivers involved in traffic accidents, and then what the step. So using the step stops as a benchmark instead of traffic, or instead of census. So it shows. So that's the 2015 disparity ratio using different benchmarks.
So if I'm looking at African American drivers, the stops is 29.5%.
No, table 8 at the bottom.
Table 8 at the bottom.
This is the
It
ratios.
goes from 199 to 157, so it's like.
So it pulls out about, I don't know how many points it is, but the census, if you use just the census, it's 1.99, and if you use the accidents, it's 1.57.
Yes.
Right, okay, thank you.
And then to go back to the other disparity ratios, using the population of drivers that are stopped, because we know what that population is. There's not a question for that. That is on page 30, table 20. So we can look at.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
understanding this, and this would be it for me because I'm tired. All right. One, to the public and people who are listening, means that you're being stopped basically at your driving population, you know what I'm saying.
At the
right?
expected level
The expected
based on
level.
the population.
Right. So anything above 1 means that you're being stopped more than you should be.
More than would be expected based on the level that, whatever the benchmark is, based on the population.
And so what we found from your analysis of the 2015 traffic stop disparity is that African Americans and Latinos, and to some degree Asians, are all being stopped more than what they basically should be.
Yeah, and that's, so anything above the yellow line on this is a higher than 1 disparity ratio. So it shows that they are stopped more often than would be expected based on our estimation of the driving population, which we're going to use the drivers involved in traffic accidents.
And these are the numbers that you have found after you weeded out anybody from the census data and all that stuff,
So
right?
this is a better measurement of drivers on city streets. But yes, there is disparity.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor,
Yes.
do we need to extend our meeting?
No, we don't.
I mean, legally.
Well, do you guys want to
I just have
just
one.
continue this discussion because it is pretty heavy?
I have one quick
Diane,
question.
go
Yes.
ahead.
Looking ahead, there's a racial disparity. So looking ahead, based on your experience with other cities who've had racial disparities and who have intentionally tried to reduce those disparities, what are the categories of stops? What are the types of stops? Do we stop looking at equipment violations? How do you systematically and effectively go about reducing these?
And I don't think we can answer that tonight, because if you look at the rest of this report, you will see that there are racial disparities in everything that we are facing in the police arena, including violent crime. So for us to make a decision tonight to say we will...
Oh, I'm not saying tonight. I'm just saying where should, do you have an idea of where we should be looking?
I think it's much bigger than just looking at traffic stops. So no, I don't have an answer for you tonight.
But that's where the disparities, I mean, that's...
But it is, I agree, it is there. And we will certainly look at, and I think Melissa will be able to help us a great deal with further analysis and the ability to dig deeper. But I don't think that we should say, because there is a disparity, we should stop doing something
Oh, no, I'm
for the
not,
sake
I'm not
of...
suggesting that. I'm just asking going forward for guidance in where we might be looking, and based on
Right.
what other cities, if there have been any other
Sure.
cities.
And
to have done
Melissa's
this.
making recommendations throughout I know
Right.
this is a very incredibly thorough report, but there are recommendations where we can drill deeper and look at ourselves and have the ability to try to figure out where we need to go from here. But you also need to see the charts that have gone
Oh, no,
down
this is great.
drastically
This
each
is-
year.
yeah,
So
this
we
has
need to
been
just
very helpful.
keep working on this, I
Right.
think, and listen to what she recommends so that we have an opportunity to extract more data and use the data to figure out the next portion, which is the question to that answer, or the answer to that question.
Okay, it is getting late, and we do want to hear more of this, but I don't think we should probably do it tonight.
How many more slides?
So,
One slide left.
There's
Do you
one
want-
slide left, Mayor. You
You
want
want
to
to just do
finish
one
this?
slide?
It's
Okay, go
the
ahead.
last one. It's just
The last
it's the
one.
searches, and all I'm really going to say about searches is we conduct searches in 1% or less than 1% of all traffic stops. They are conducted in very small number of cases. So I presented the total number of stops, the total number of consent searches, and then the racial breakdown from that. This is reported yearly to IDOT, and I think that we should just continue to monitor it for substantial changes, but because it's in such a small percentage of all the traffic stops we conduct, I don't think further analysis is necessary here.
Okay, Eric.
You mentioned orally, but it wasn't in your report yet, doing some sort of weighting or correlation with calls for service in either geocodes or beats. And will that be coming?
That's a great lead-in. Thank you so much, because the next portion to helping Melissa do her job, and Sylvia, who has been very patient in the back of the room, is working on this now with an RFP and a number of other things. The one portion that we're lacking is the ability, as I chatted with the mayor, the ability for us to map and use intelligence-led policing to direct us to move us in the direction that we want to go. And that's going to be the portion that's going to be presented to you in just, I don't know when, in the near future.
Soon, okay.
But it is a good point, and it is certainly something that she said, I can't do my job without it. And the good news is it's not going to cost nearly as much as body cameras.
Okay, Charlie?
I'm hoping it costs even less than that. It's just
It
an
will.
add-on to existing licenses. We do have one more. We have a
Yeah, we have
approval of a
one more
person.
item, but,
I was going to say is there are some. Are you familiar with two-way tables where you control for other factors, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, there's some places in here where I think that would be really useful, and maybe we can talk about that. And in addition to the geospatial stuff,
That'd
but
be
I think there's some of that. I really appreciate the fact that you understand small numbers, and so. And the limitations there. So wherever where we can aggregate, that's good. What I'd recommend doing is, you know, we've submitted a couple sets of questions, and what I'd like to do is get all those questions, sit down with this report, and sort of match them up, and maybe you can help me or help us match those up.
Many of those are addressed, some
Right,
of them are
yes,
not.
Right, yeah, and match those up so that we can sort of point to which ones are on what pages, and then figure out what we can do about answering some of the other questions. And that I would take up in committee.
Okay.
Yes, if there's time in our next committee meeting, while it's fresh in our minds, I'd like to do that.
Sure.
Otherwise,
We will do
in 3
that.
weeks.
So we really appreciate the work that you've done on this, and we're just starting.
Yes.
So we're not
many,
ready to
many
figure out
hours.
what to do, but we're getting closer.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That we missed?
Okay, so we will move on to new business. There was just one item, and that's the reappointment of Brad Hauk to the Building Safety
So
Code.
moved.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded
Aye.
by Mr. Jacobson. All those in favor, please signify by saying
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
No.
All right, thank you. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.